now my pleasure to invite to the podium to introduce tonight's honoree, an alum from Mike Donohoe's class, who has played sports with Mike, who shares many fond memories with him from their time together at Cistercian, and who has remained all through these years a close and a long-time friend, Mr. Steve Rasch. Steve is the past recipient himself of the award. He has served as class agent, sustentation chair, and a school board member for quite a number of years. And it must be mentioned that in coordinating the annual sustentation drive, Steve has done an absolutely unparalleled job of ensuring right at 100% participation each and every year, along with record levels of giving. And as a board member, his wise counsel and his legal insight have proven simply invaluable. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve Rasch of the class of 1980.
I'll also be glad to join you on any of those tours if you would like. Always have my hand out looking wherever I can.
But Steve, the building's paid for.
It's never too early to get started. The silent phase of the next campaign. A couple of groans. Father Abbott, Father Paul, members of the Cistercian clergy, alumni, and friends. It is my privilege this evening to introduce to you the fourth member of the class of 1980 to receive the Jim and Lynn Moroney Award. Absent some unexpected achievement, this may be the final member of our class to achieve this award. After reviewing the class of 1980 roster list, the class of 1974 has resumed their trash talking as to how we will never catch them in numbers of Moroney Award winners. This will be the third member of my class that I've introduced at this event, but it was not supposed to be this way. Mike called me soon after receiving the news that he had been selected as this year's honoree to talk about who should introduce him tonight. In typical Mike Donohoe fashion, he was concerned about hurting someone's feelings in his selection. In talking through the options for the people to introduce Mike, we quickly ruled out Paul Tomaso, who had developed a phobia for public speaking after proclaiming, "I, Patty, take thee, Paul," at the business end of his wedding. True story. Mike then suggested that perhaps Ed and I could introduce Mike together. I remembered the two-headed introduction that Matt Hawkins had received by Joe Capasso and Tim Rogers, and all we could remember is they kept raising their glasses to toast various priests, and that was really awkward, so we ruled out the joint introduction. I gave Mike the green light to go ahead and ask Ed to give this introduction tonight and promised that it would not hurt my feelings. After that call, I actually felt a sense of relief, realizing how difficult it would be to roast Mike because I could not remember anything he had ever done wrong. Ed soon realized the challenge of roasting Mike and sent an email to our class on New Year's Eve, and that email was looking for dirt. If anybody could dig up dirt on Mike Donohoe. That email read in part, "How do you roast a guy that just survived a major cancer scare and was known as A-cubed-B?" A-cubed-B was Mike's nickname in high school. It stands for All American Angel Boy. So I saw Ed's email and I thought to myself, "Ed, yeah, that's a good question. How are you going to roast Mike Donohoe? Good luck with that." Well, it wasn't too long after that Ed developed another back problem that would prevent him from being here this evening. Now, we all know that Ed is fragile. But this is the second time in the last few years that Ed has bailed out at the last minute when called upon to introduce a Moroney Award winner. Due to the suspicious circumstances surrounding this year's withdrawal, we've decided to give Ed a call tonight to check on him and see how he's doing with this back procedure that he allegedly had yesterday. So, we're going to find out how Ed's doing. I hope it's not too late and we're not bothering him. So if you bear with me just a minute. We'll give Ed a call here. See how this goes.
like a TV show.
Can you all hear that? Hello, can I speak to Ed, please? Is Ed Johnson there, please? Ed Johnson. Yeah. Yeah, Big Ed. Can you put Big Ed on the phone? Go ahead and go find Big Ed. Put him on the phone. He needs to answer a couple questions for us. Ed? Hello, Ed? Ed, is that you? Ed, we're at the Moroney Award dinner. We wanted to see how your back surgery went. Sounds like Ed's having a very speedy recovery. When Mike arrived at Cistercian as a fifth former, he was instantly the best athlete in our class and one of the best athletes in the school. By his senior year, Mike would go on to earn first-team all-conference honors in football, basketball, and track. In addition to his athletic prowess, Mike became known for his even temper and good-natured disposition. Mike never got into trouble. Thus the moniker A-cubed-B, All-American Angel Boy. It was difficult to even get a rise out of Mike over anything. When it came to heated political discussions, Mike declared that he was Switzerland. The only thing that was extreme about Mike was his moderation. Henry Kissinger once said that moderation is a virtue only in those who are thought to have an alternative. I can assure you that Mike was presented with alternatives by the class of 1980. Father Abbot Dennis described our class this way, and I will not try the accent since I'm seated 2 seats away from him this evening. Father Dennis described our class. He said, individually, you are a bunch of nice guys. Together, you are like the Roman Senate, a pack of vicious dogs. In this pack of vicious, Mike was the one wagging his tail in the dogs playing poker portrait. The only reaction that I ever saw from Mike to something that caused him displeasure is when he would purse his lips and smack them together, kind of like a... That was Mike's equivalent of an F-bomb laced tirade. 2 occasions where I observed some lip smacking from Mike come to mind. The first was during a routine food fight taking place during class while the unsuspecting teacher had his back turned to the class. Kevin Glasheen hurled a piece of bologna across the room, creating a perfect strike on the left side of Mike's face. The piece of bologna, covered with mustard, smacks Mike's left cheek and stuck. Mike slowly turned his head with the piece of bologna covered with mustard and showing Kevin's bite marks hanging from his face. Mike smacked his lips, but nothing more. Mike, I will say Mike did decline to follow the gospel admonition to turn the other cheek out of concern for whatever Kevin was going to throw next. The other incident in which I thought Mike might finally blow his stack occurred at a bar on Northwest Highway called the Beggar Club. Those men of a certain age here this evening might remember the Beggar at Northwest Highway and Webb Chapel Extension, just down Northwest Highway from European Crossroads. The Beggar was known for its all-you-can-drink specials, which, of course, Mike approached with due moderation. There were a few of us there one evening, and Ed Johnson got up out of his seat and headed toward the restroom. As Ed passed behind Mike, Ed inexplicably turned his head and vomited on top of Mike's head. Ed's dinner was in Mike's hair and rolling down his face. I was probably the most upset I've ever seen Mike, but again, the only reaction was the lip smacking, which occurred that night at an accelerated rate. The rest of us were less concerned about Mike's predicament than we were about whether this unfortunate incident was going to kill what up to that point had been a very enjoyable evening. So we immediately took our napkins, started to pat Mike down, and explained to him that it really wasn't that bad. And in any event, certainly no reason to consider leaving the beggar. Mike declined our invitation to continue the evening and instead decided to head for the comforts of a shower and a change of clothes. Putting forgiveness into action, Mike offered to take the perpetrator, Ed Johnson, home. Ed wisely accepted Mike's generous offer. Proving that no good deed goes unpunished, Ed then threw up in Mike's car on the way home. After hearing this story later, I could only imagine how fast Mike's lip must have been smacking. After Ed first soiled Mike and then soiled his car. Although Mike was almost entirely innocent of any wrongdoing during his 4 years at Cistercian, he was, by necessity, sometimes at the scene of the crime. A large group of our class spent a week in South Padre right after our graduation. In fact, there was an all-night graduation party at Brian Miller's house, and our negligent parents somehow thought it was acceptable for us to make a 10-hour drive on no sleep after a night of partying. We reached our destination, but that's where the problems began. Without getting into all the details of what occurred that first evening in South Padre, let me say that our group did not show the highest degree of maturity as newly minted Cistercian graduates. On the morning after that first night, there was an ominous knock at the door of the condominium where we were all packed in to stay. When we heard the knock, we glanced at each other with that same "I'm not going to answer it" look. Mike instinctively knew that it would be his job to answer the door and to project a voice of reason. Mike opened the door, and it was the condominium manager who started the conversation by saying, "We've had some complaints." He rattled off a list of 8 to 10 violations that had allegedly occurred within the first 24 hours of our arrival at the complex. I remember a few of them. He said, "You've been blaring loud music. Someone in your group was seen naked, hands on hips on the balcony. Your group has been feeding Alka-Seltzer tablets to the seagulls. You threw all of the lawn chairs in the pool last night. And finally, a member of your group chased and frightened a group of teenage girls last night." Mike stood there calmly and acknowledged in a remorseful tone, "Sir, we did a number of those things. We're not proud of that. We will clean up our act, and you will have no more trouble from us the rest of the week. But I must say that we absolutely, positively, were not the ones who chased and frightened those teenage girls." The man reluctantly accepted Mike's explanation and earnest pledge to do better. Mike closed the door, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. Soon after the door closed, I heard the voice of Kevin Glasheen, who said, "Nice job, Mike. But I need to tell you that the complaint about chasing and frightening the teenage girls, we did that one too." That was me. The closest that Mike came to being directly involved in mischief was that he was occasionally an accomplice. He was the driver in the infamous duck napping incident that took place during senior year. We sometimes that year had double or triple lunches, and that extra time provided ample opportunity for creative ways to disrupt a class. During one of those extended lunch periods one day, Mike drove some of his classmates to lunch in Irving. They passed a park where they had previously noticed that ducks like to congregate. One of our classmates had an idea that it would be fun to bring one of those ducks as a visitor to the classroom. Mike drove the getaway car while a couple of our classmates grabbed the duck. Brian Miller hid the duck under his jacket and brought the duck into class. The duck was kept at the back of the classroom, but as you might imagine, began to get noisy. Our teacher, who shall remain unnamed, confronted the class. "Who is making those duck noises?" Each of us was able to look at the teacher and respond truthfully, "It wasn't me." Brian Miller escaped with the duck by pretending he had to use the restroom. When Brian returned, the duck was gone. We later learned that Brian had deposited the duck in one of the teacher's offices. I don't want to name that teacher, but his initials are Dr. TP. So many mysteries unraveled at this dinner. If you have read Mike's profile card, you know that he is fluent in the language of sarcasm and self-deprecating humor. Yet Mike's outlook is not defined by self-deprecating attitudes, but rather by the esteem with which he has always regarded others. It was Father Henry who taught us that humility is not thinking less of oneself, it's thinking of oneself less. Mike has given generously of his time and talent to Cistercian. He taught an elective class on business ethics at Cistercian on a volunteer basis. He served as a sustentation form captain, has run the alumni golf tournament, and has served as co-president of the Hawks Booster Club. Mike has been an inspiration to the entire Cistercian community over the last year. On February 17th, 2013, last year, I received an email from Mike letting me know that he would not be able to attend the annual Forum Captain's Night as a wrap-up to the sustentation campaign. Mike's email explained that he had developed some kind of mystery illness and was in the hospital. Several days later, Mike was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. He soon was receiving around-the-clock chemotherapy. The outpouring of love and support from the Cistercian community was remarkable. For his part, Mike confronted this new challenge with his trademark humor, optimism, and steadiness. I am still staggered by Mike's strength over these last 11 months, by the courage of his calm. That same competitive spirit that earned Mike honors in athletics served him well in a battle with his most formidable opponent. As Mike put it to me one day when I visited him at the hospital, "I don't like to lose, and I'm going to beat this thing." When I left the hospital that day, there was no doubt in my mind that Mike would be victorious. It's common when someone overcomes a serious illness for that person to say that the experience has caused him or her to reassess their priorities in life. And I'm sure that Mike has had some of those same feelings. But from my vantage point, and I think I speak for all of my classmates in saying this, Mike has had his priorities in the right place, dating all the way back to high school. The last 11 months have provided a window for the entire Cistercian community to the strength of Mike's character. For those of us in the class of 1980, we've seen it for over 35 years. Please join me in congratulating A3B Mike Donohoe, the 2014 recipient of the Jim and Lynn Moroney Award.